Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite Your Heart Masterclass. I am so excited because today I have sex and intimacy expert Leah Piper with me. Welcome to the show, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And for those of us who aren't familiar with your work, could you formally introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. Well, I have been in the intimacy arts for over 20 years. I'm an advanced certified Tantra educator, taught thousands of people in workshops and teacher trainings, and then one on one in my private practice, More Love Works. I'm also a positive psychology coach and facilitator, and I've been certified in many various somatic therapies. So my specialty is in sexual healing, spiritualizing sex, and really just looking at this wide array of options around what's happening in our culture right now, which is an opportunity to reimagine sexuality. In fact, I have a podcast on that topic called the Sex Reimagined Podcast. So I'm also a co host.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm very excited to dive into this topic. One of the things you mentioned is the world around us is shifting. So I would love to dive into, can you update us on what exactly is happening in
Sure.
the sexual wellness world and the intimacy and relationship space?
Yeah, so we had this amazing sexual revolution, right, in the 60s and the 70s, and now we're at a time in our culture where it's time for a sexual evolution. And although the sexual revolution, gave us permission to be pleasure forward and to be more free with how we express our bodies and our sexuality and relationships, it also left a lot of people really wounded. And so now it's the time to take a look at consciousness as it relates to sexuality and how do we bring our spiritual selves to the bedroom. For many of us in the West, we don't have a great example of sort of this. It's like, who's our model for spiritual sex? We got a couple of virgins. If we look at Christianity, that doesn't really help us with a divine relationship, and how do we want to challenge ourselves and really be with our partner in a very deep, soulful, intimate way. And so there are things that really require us to develop parts of ourselves in order to have more profound and deeper intimacy. And there are three things that are the real cornerstones of intimacy, and that is vulnerability, presence, and trust. We have to learn how to trust others. And before we can do that, we have to make sure we trust ourselves. And a lot of us are struggling oftentimes with, trusting that we're going to make the right choices, trusting we're going to pick the right partner, trusting that if we make a mistake, it can be fixed, especially in partnership and in sex. And then that vulnerability is hard because vulnerable actually translates to woundable. So when we're vulnerable, it's like we're exposing our inner guts and saying, I hope you like what you see and you won't run away. It's like our most tender part. And what many of us haven't realized yet is that we are our most lovable when we are vulnerable, because we're really putting ourselves in those hands, that they're going to trust our heart, that they're going to take care of our heart and treat our heart as something that is sacred, treat our body as something that is sacred. So vulnerability is powerful, and it's a key element to profound sex. And then when you've got trust and you've got vulnerability, presence is kind of a natural occurring thing. It makes it much easier to stay in the moment. And it's in the moment that sex takes on a mystical quality. It's like that's where we can kind of take sexuality and make it more of a transcendent experience. And deep down, my opinion is deep down in every person, we crave to have a more mystical, a more beautiful, a more deep, soulful experience of pleasure and connection with another human being.
I love that connection and trust. Trust is a big one, and vulnerability. Can you dive into a little bit of each aspect? and how maybe we can step into that. Like, how can we actually open ourselves up to vulnerability? How can we actually open ourselves up to more connection and really trusting?
Sorry, a little dog was about to jump over the couch and take the microphone with it. Yeah, I can. I think this is where people get trust wrong, is they expect the world to prove, or they expect other people to prove that they are trustworthy. They don't actually lead with trust. They keep on going, are you trustworthy? Are you trustworthy? Are you trustworthy? Are you going to disappoint me? Are you going to break my heart? And so we think that trust is something that opens from the outside, that it's someone else's job to deliver us trust. But that's not the case. Trust is an inside job. If you trust yourself and you do your work, you can trust that the people that you choose are in fact trustworthy, because you know how to spot them, because you've done the work on yourself to go, I trust myself. I trust myself to make the right decisions for me. I also trust myself to end something when I spot things that aren't in congruence with what I need in my life. When I get that warning bell, something's off here, I trust that I can listen to that. When I take a look at my values and I'm dating somebody new and we explore their values, it's like, are we in the same ballpark? Can you trust yourself not to ignore a category of values where you're not a match? You don't have to be exact values in every category, but you should be in the same ballpark when it comes to your spiritual beliefs, your what you like to do for travel, and how you feel about children and family, and how you feel about money, and how you feel about nutrition and food and being active in your life, because we don't all have the same values. And when I look back on all the relationships that have ended in my life, it's because a value didn't line up. It's like someone had very differing financial goals than I did, or someone had very different feelings about family, or someone had very different feelings around spiritual pursuits, or someone had different values around monogamy or polyamory and open relationships and monogamish and that whole category. So when we really like someone, sometimes we want to ignore that. We want to ignore the category or two or three or four that don't line up because we're in the ooh la las. But if you cultivate self-trust, you pay attention to those things. And instead of ending what looks like could be a great relationship, you move it into friendship. Or if you're a tantrika, you practice the art of love. You practice how to meet someone and have them be a tantra buddy, where you get to do sensuality practices and you develop a deep friendship, not because you want to fix them so they'll be the partner of your dreams, but so that you both leave each other better than the way you found each other, that you make a positive impact in each other's life. And you really show up in connection and friendship, and you're rooting for them and they're rooting for you. And you learn different practices such as sex magic, where you learn manifestation things. I know before I met my husband, I was dating this wonderful guy and I wanted him to be the one. I really did. We had so many values that really lined up. Like, we were on the same business track and we'd love to travel the same way. And there were so many great potential for our relationship to shine. There were two areas but we could not meet in when it came to our values. And I wanted to ignore it. And I think he did too. But instead, we took a pause, we made different agreements. And I said, I want to play in the energy of love with you. I'm going to still protect my heart, because we're not really the best fit. And I don't want us to lie to each other, but I'm so enjoying your company. I think you're so awesome. You're such a cool human. And I want to keep exploring this, but I need you to know I'm looking for my PhD in relationship. I'm looking for the beloved. I want to get married. And if that's not going to be you, maybe you can help me find my future mister. Maybe we can play with sensuality practices and take our dreams for what we're really wanting to bring into our life and put that into our sensuality practices and send that up to the universe. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. 6 months later, I found the love of my life, Matthew. We've been married for 8 years, together for 10. And I really credit that relationship and the consciousness in that relationship, the honesty of which we cared for each other, and the exploration of going, let's play with the energy of love and let's not get caught up in the emotion of love that could cause us to wound each other.
Mhm.
And I can't say that there weren't tender moments of going, I really do want to fall in love with you. You know, when you get that achy feeling in your heart and it's like, oh, you really like this person, you like them so much it kind of hurts a little bit, but so good. It was like I had to hold that for myself and go, I'm going to enjoy this feeling, but I'm not going to take it too seriously because this
Mhm.
isn't my guy.
When you had mentioned exploring sensuality with this person, even though you didn't want to overstep the boundary of actually falling in love, what were some of those? What does that include, right? Like, does that include sexual intimacy in it, or does
Yeah.
it include like emotional intimacy? Like, what does that look like actually?
Great question, because this is such a personal answer. You know, in Tantra, we have all sorts of intimacy practices that don't include taking off your clothes. You can do so many beautiful practices that gives you a greater skill set at being a better lover, but you can keep your clothes on. And then there are ways to advance those same practices and take your clothes off that also don't put you at the risk of getting a sexually transmitted disease. So there are ways to play, that doesn't mean you have to have genital to genital intercourse, that allows you to step into the full embodiment of your senses. And when we're connected to our senses, we're able to really bask in sensuality. And then there are ways to also, you can have sex, of course. There's ways to have tantric lovemaking without, with the purpose of having certain goals that you practice together. Like me pulling in my partner, Matt, those were full on sex, intimate connections. We were having sex together and it was great sex. And trust me, every orgasm I had, I dedicated that to my future guy. And that's part of the power. And my friend Koa was totally supportive of that. And so we would have so much fun having these orgastic experiences, exploring each other's bodies, being really deeply connected, and in the pursuit of our dreams. We use those orgasms and we put them onto the universe so that they would be made manifest for each other. And does that take a pretty, not every individual is that in alignment for. Some people have a harder time separating sex from falling in love. And so you have to really be able to take care of yourself and have that ability. Do not have sex if that hooks you into expectations that you're not ready for and that other person isn't ready for. That's why agreements are very, very important. So you can take those tantric practices and you can make them as platonic or as sensual or as sexual as you want to go. So a
Mm.
lot of them include like meditation and breathing together and holding each other in certain ways. We work with the chakras and we work with energy transmission, and you learn skills around rewiring the nervous system so you can hold the capacity for more pleasure. We work with sexual healing practices so that you can heal each other's hearts, heal each other's bodies, especially if you've been traumatized by breakups or disappointments or even sexual trauma. So there's all sorts of skills that you can learn that increase your ability to be a better lover, to be a sexual healer, and to be an amazing friend. And kind of back to the friendship piece, the way that we see relationship is that friendship is the highest relationship. And if you don't have friendship in your marriage, if you don't have friendship in your long-term relationship, like that's the thing we have to protect no matter what, is the cultivation of our friendship. Because sex comes and goes in long-term relationships. There are times when we are in a resting stage, and we better be able to count on our friendship to get us through all the obstacles you're going to face in the future. And before we move on, I just want to get this one thing out because I don't want to worry about forgetting it. Because here's the other thing about Tantra buddies and Tantra practices that keeps individuals really safe, especially when you're managing your emotions and you're managing how do you focus on sexuality and sensuality without getting too emotionally um, attached, is we separate the roles of giver and receiver. So when one person, so if we're having an intimacy practice, right? Maybe we're playing with some sexual healing. One person is the receiver, and their job is to have a meditative experience of feeling the sensations in their body. So they're using their breath and they're connecting to sound and they're following what's happening in the inside of their body. They're tracking pleasure. They're tracking where they're feeling blocks. They're tracking if they have a moment of not being able to trust. And then with the support of the person who's giving to them, they process that. They're together in that. And so the giver's job is to practice only being a giver. We're not trying to exchange pleasure at the same time. One person receives so they can deeply be with who they're becoming as a sensual, sexual, pleasure-filled human. And then one person is really focused on evolving their touch, looking at touch, massaging the body in such an exquisite way. They're learning to be more of a masterful giver of pleasure, more of a masterful giver of healing touch and sensual touch. And they're delighting in the shape and the feel of someone else's body. They're delighting in pouring into that person the essence of love through their eyes, through their words, through their hands, through their hearts. And there's something incredible about being able to capture pleasure, the subtle pleasure that we miss because we're both trying to do something at the same time. It's like when we're both busy giving and receiving at the same time, we miss so much. So it's really cool to sort of slow down the sexuality practices, discover what's there for them, watch how that expands their pleasure thresholds. And then when they do decide to have sex and where people are doing things at the same time together to each other, your capacity to feel is exponential. And again, this is where we start to find ourselves in the realm of more mystical, sacred, spiritual experiences, because then we start to take a look at the other and we see if we can't see the God or the goddess inside of them. Can we play in the playground of the divine? Can we evoke and invoke the presence of our faith, of what we see as a higher power, into the room and into each other, so that love making becomes a prayer between two people? And that's a pretty cool experience.
That is, oh, delightful just thinking about that or just hearing about that because we live in such a fast-paced world and such a way where you think, especially from external sources like pornography, it's like it has to be quick, it has to be like hard, it has to, and then when you actually lean in to the intimacy and the softness, little things like just the breath, little things just like a soft stroke, little things of just like being connected and not actually having to move much, but
Yes.
feeling the sensation and just feeling the sensation. And you can actually work your way up to the pleasure mentally, emotionally, physically through those little things. I remember in the beginning, like I'm a very rough person, right? And then because nobody taught me anything. And for my husband, a soft little, like gentle rub, and he gets so turned on. A
Okay,
gentle
cool.
little rub, right? And I
Yes, yes,
was
yes. I know just what you're talking about.
I remember even one time I decided I was gonna do Reiki because I learned Reiki at the time. It was like a year ago. And I was like, can you lay down so I can just do Reiki on you? He had no idea what the heck I was doing. I just had my hands like an inch above his skin. And he turned around and he was like turned on. And I was like, well, I didn't even touch you.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, there's lots of I don't know if you've ever heard of the erotic blueprints. I really love their system because they talk, it's kind of like the love languages of the bedroom, where people have more of an energetic, like they become more aroused with more an energetic touch. And
Mm.
so what they really love is like the space between touch, right? And Reiki is perfect for that. And when if you're an energetic, it's like anticipation is so delicious. It's so evocative. It's such a turn on. And then you have people who are more sensual in nature, and therefore the senses, like they're the ones that bring beauty to sex. They love the music and the soft fabrics, and they love little nibbles and libations, and they love to, you know, really play with all the things, all the senses, and then it's so lovely. So you really have to up on romance if you are in a relationship with someone who's a sensual. And then we have people who are sexuals, and sexuals are like, oh, it's like all of the visuals, right? It's like penetration and all the like primary erogenous zones. They want to see them, they want to touch them, they want to lick them, they want to do all the things to them, right? So it's like very it's I don't, there's sort of like a little adolescence and innocence oftentimes to it, and they can be annoyed by the other types because they're like, stop complicating sex, okay? It's easy, it's simple, it's fun, let's
Yeah.
just do it. And then you have people who are kinky, and they love to play with sensation and fantasy and psychological play, and so they've got more of a kink fetish desires, and that's what opens them. It's like, tie me up and turn me on, you know, that's just the way their
Yeah.
system is wired. And then you have folks who are shapeshifters, and the shapeshifters, they love it all and they love it all the time. And so they're basically connected to all of them and can really adapt to any situation. And so we all have kind of like a primary, secondary, but the idea is that we don't just focus on the ones that come naturally to us, are the ones that are just our natural go-to. The challenge is actually to learn about all of them and discover how you can lean in to each one. And from that place, again, it's a bit of an evolution. It's like we're challenging ourselves to discover more of who we are. We're challenging ourselves to have actual self-realization through sexuality, through pleasure, through expanding the possibilities. And I think for some people, they may hear that and it might seem a little scary. It might seem really unfamiliar because people are afraid of being weird, right? They're afraid of what other people think. And so we try to like toe the line. But we sometimes do ourselves a disservice if we're not curious enough to really explore, oh my God, there's so much possibility here. And
Yeah.
I think that's why, you know, on my show, we're really trying to open up people's views and to expose them to new things by having different researchers and therapists and experts and spiritual people who are doing the cutting edge in the world of sexuality and in intimacy and in partnership, so that people can really take a look. Like, this is the most important thing that we cultivate in our life, is the quality of our relationships.
Yeah.
And sex is a unique part of that. Sexual love is a unique, precious part of our human experience. It's how we get into the world. And it actually affects every sector of our life when it's going badly. So it behooves us to take a look at sex as an art form and study it that way.
I love that. When we open up this conversation of maybe like you are the cutting edge now, right? So you're the one going out and exploring these things and being open. How do you even open this conversation up to a potential partner?
Oh gosh, so that is the question of the universe, my friend. You know, and here's what I always tell people. I think it's actually easier when you're sort of dating is to be able to have conversations about sexuality. Sometimes that's easier than doing it later. So you could say something like, what's important to you when it comes to sexual intimacy? What are the things that turn you on? And, you know, I'm really, you know, seeking and learning about things that I've never tried and I've never explored. I mean, I hear some of the things that I know I kind of like, and it's kind of, I'm kind of shy about talking about it. But I read this article the other day. I'd love to know what you think of it. So start listening to podcasts around relationship sexuality, especially when it's connected to the things that you feel like are aligned with your values. And then, you know, see and check out things that maybe you're unfamiliar with. Consider going on an adventure and finding out that there are things you don't know that you like. And so whether it's looking at articles, books, magazines, podcasts, blogs, especially YouTube, there's so much content on YouTube for you to find out new information, things that really make you think, things that you want to have conversations with other people about. And then you can share if you're dating somebody new. Hey, check out this article. What do you think about it? Hey, I heard this woman talk about the erotic blueprints and I looked it up online. Oh, check out this episode from the Sex Reimagined podcast. I'm really curious what that made you think or how it made you feel. And then you're having an open dialogue. And it's just two people sharing, what you like and what you don't like. How did something cause you to think a little bit more? And this is really fun dinner party conversation.
Oh
So
my
great for
God.
icebreakers at dinner parties and parties at large. I mean, for someone who's always been curious about sex, I've not been afraid to bring it up in social situations. And then the next thing you know, you are surrounded by the whole party because people are riveted about sexuality, relationships, and intimacy.
That's for me coming from a very conservative like background, like nobody ever talks about it. I don't even remember my parents talking to me about this. Like I and so there's a lot of misinformation and not enough education about this. And there's a lot of like shame around it, right? Like it's a
So much.
natural part of reproduction, but there's so much shame that nobody talks about it. And then you get into a relationship and you're like, well, we're just gonna neglect that part, or we're not gonna explore that part. We're just not gonna talk about
Right.
it.
Right. And then we start to drift away from each other.
Mm,
Sex is easy in the first year of your relationship. Everyone's in a hurry to, pull each other's clothes off. It's just natural. We have hormones, we've got chemistry flooding our brain. The best cocktail in the world is flooding our brain. It's testosterone, oxytocin, dopamine, opioids. And this is a flood of really delicious sensations running through our system that's causing us to want to tear each other's clothes off. But after that first 6 months to a year, those hormones go away. They drift. The love goes deeper. But the sex and that drive to like really be together in a sexual way, then you got to kind of work on it, because then we get into routines. And then you add kids to the mix and marriage to the mix, and you get comfortable to the mix, and all these other things become more important. And then people start taking a look 8, 10, 15, 12, 20 years later. Gee, why aren't we in love anymore? Because we're neglecting that sexual intimacy. And it's such a unique experience as a human being. We only choose so many sexual partners in a lifetime to explore this really precious thing that gives us so much pleasure. I mean, we think about an orgasm is like a reset on our nervous system. Life looks better after an orgasm. It's like it truly renews the soul when it gets weary. And life gives us a lot of reasons to feel weary. And
mm.
so here we have his pleasure connection, and hopefully a lover who is our best friend, or a best friend who becomes our lover, who we get to share this precious thing called life with. Let's not treat it as a routine. Let's not take it for granted. Let's make sure we keep it special. Let's make sure we treat it as something that is sacred and important and a part of every day if we're fortunate enough to have that person.
Yeah, I love that so much. Do you have like beginners like practices that maybe you can share one or two on the show with us that
Yeah, let me just think about that. So I think this is an interesting um, practice, and it sounds simple, but sometimes it's a little hard to do. But it is very simple. So, and it's an important beginner practice, and that is eye gazing. Is eye gazing creepy? Or is it sexy? Is it like, which one is it? And so, in order for it not to be creepy, you gotta have some skill. You gotta have some style when it comes to eye gazing, okay? You don't wanna stare, just stare at your partner. That's like too much. But you can gaze. So your eyes need to be really, really soft. And your eyes really need to be really curious. Like the eyes are the doorway to the soul. There are some things, not all of us find communication and finding the right words easy. Some of us actually have a hard time giving a voice to how we're feeling and sharing like how much something means to us through words. So if you use eye gazing, there's so much you can communicate. Like you can softly share the things that you don't know how to say yet through the eyes. You can let someone, you can soften your eyes so much that you let them see into you. You let them see into your heart and how much they mean to you. You let them see into your throat and all the things you're scared to say but you want to say. You let them see what they're making you feel all the way down there. And so you bring that to the table, and it's not that you have to like eye gaze for long periods of time. Just even like 30 seconds is enough to release oxytocin, and oxytocin is the bonding chemical. That's what creates connection. So when you just connect with each other through the eyes just for 30 seconds, that's like putting a big deposit into your love bank account. And also, you can help your partner if they like really, because some eye contact for some people is very challenging, and in certain cultures, it's extra challenging. And so, what you can do to learn how to sustain better eye contact is to guide your partner. Let's say your partner is one that struggles with it, and say, because my husband really struggled with it when we first met, like he could barely withstand it. So, I would say, okay, like just look into my eyes, and now look at my nose, and now look into my eyes, and now look at my jaw. And now look into my eyes. And now look at my cheekbones. And now look into my eyes. Check out my lips. And I would touch my lips. And now look into my eyes. So you see, now I'm waiting a beat or two longer. And now look at my eyebrows and the shape of them. And now look into my eyes. And so you can kind of go back and forth of guiding each other into how to like hold and withstand, more and more of that type of intimacy. And also, don't be too surprised if tears kind of show up, because this is what evokes vulnerability. When we're eye gazing, we're letting somebody see us. And that's a skill we have to build and cultivate. That's what vulnerability is all about. And so that can be very touching. It can be very moving. It can be kind of scary. But you're putting your trust in someone to say, I'm going to stay right here with you. And so that's a practice that someone's going to have to take a little bit of the leadership role in, and invite as a path to cultivate those things like intimacy, which what does that require? Vulnerability, presence, and trust. And so right there with that exercise, you can't be thinking about anything else. You're in the moment. That is presence, right? Look at my cheek. Now look at my eyes. Look at my lips. Now look at my eyes. You're helping someone stay right there with you. And because you're asking them to see, you have to be willing to trust yourself to open and know that if you make a mistake and you trust the wrong person and you're vulnerable with the wrong person, that you're going to be okay. That is self-trust. And that you know how to make the best choices going forward. That is self-trust. So I hope to leave that with everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that exercise and the way that you walk through it, especially if it's discomfort, to look at other areas of the face first and then come back to the eyes and then extending the time period for that connection. Um, if there, this is more of a personal question, but like, um, was your partner as open as you were to this in the
Great,
beginning?
great question. So he was at a place in his life where he'd been pretty contracted. He hadn't dated anyone in 7 years. And his family business had just sold to a consolidator. So he is 45 and going, I am going to have a lot of free time on my hands. What am I going to do now? I have lived and slept and worked, like it's all been about work. And when it wasn't about work, it was about working out and reading. And now suddenly I am confronted with, should I try out relationships again? Am I cut out for that? What would sex be like again? Like all these things. It took 7 years of not dating anyone. And so he kind of decided it's adventure time. So he started seeing a therapist, and the therapist challenged him. She said, I want you to do these 3 hard things that may be uncomfortable. I want you to go to an ecstatic dance class. I want you to check out a high workshop, and I want you to look for a tantra teacher. And so he scoured the internet, he found me. And so he was my student first. And I was so impressed with what a good student he was. And remember, I was looking for my PhD in relationship. And like we just really hit it off. And I finally said, you know what? I like you. I keep on trying to put you on a shelf and go, don't like him too much, don't like him too much. But here's the truth, I really like you. I'd like to fire you from being my student. And I would like to now share in, possibly taking this a little further. Would that work for you? Does this work for you? And he said, oh my God, yes. So we did a little kind of a little ritual ceremony where we changed our relationship from student teacher to man woman to let's try this dating thing out. And then we were inseparable. We were just inseparable from that moment on. And we're married 2 years later.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on your
Thank
marriage.
you.
What a beautiful story and unfolding. And it goes to show for everyone else listening that there's so many possibilities in
Yeah.
finding the one for you. And especially through your practice, also being able to have fun and tune into the pleasure while doing so.
Yeah, and I just have to say, like, was my partner into it? He was scared shitless. He didn't know what he was getting into. He's like, "What the hell is tantra, anyways? What am I going to be expected to do?" And so we took the journey slow, and he learned. Thankfully, here's the skill that he brought with him: curiosity and a love of learning.
Mhm.
Those two things catapulted us, because if he wasn't willing, if he came in judgmental, if he didn't like stay open and curious, there was only so far we were going to be able to go. So I'm really grateful that he had both the curiosity and the love of learning, because if he didn't, he probably would have never taken that therapist's advice. And to this day, I'm very grateful to that therapist.
Those are good advice. It really
Great
is.
advice. Yeah. Yeah, get out of your comfort zone. I mean, I think that's how you meet the best people too. If you've
Oh,
been stuck in dating, switch up your cafes. Don't go through the drive-through. Check out a new class. Go to cooking class, go to a kickboxing class, go to a yoga class. Like do something you haven't done. Expose yourself to new things, and you expose yourself to new types of people.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Piper, for being here, for sharing all your wisdom, for your
Yeah.
delicious conversation. And before we end today, I would love to share your free gift with the audience. Could you do that for us?
Sure. Okay, so speaking of pleasure, one of the things in my studies over these decades is the mistake that vulva owners make um, when they can see that orgasm in the distance. It's like, oh, I'm almost through the door. I can feel it coming. I'm so close. I'm so close. I'm so close. And then suddenly it's gone. Where did the orgasm go? It's like our climax just disappeared on us. So if you're like me, you've had those experiences. It's like that ever elusive clitoral orgasm. And so I have discovered and found out the thing that we do, the thing that we're getting wrong. And I'm here to tell you it is so simple. The correction is so simple. I'm going to blow your mind. So now I want you to imagine the collective missed clitoral orgasms that vulva owners have been missing out on through the ages since the beginning of time across the globe, and the travesty of that. Like, we must make a change. So I want you to watch this video on my website, and then I want you to tell everybody the secret. Okay, so this is for vulva owners, and it's for people who love to pleasure vulva owners. You gotta watch this video. It's only 5 minutes long. It's a great tutorial, and you will never miss another clitoral orgasm again. You will never have to chase it, because that door is gonna come to you. You don't have to go finding it.
Oh, wow. I'm so excited to share your free gift. And if anyone's interested in any of your other offers, what is your website that they can reach you at?
So, moreloveworks.com is website number 2, and sexreimagine.com is website number 2. Did I say More Love Works was website number 1 or website number 2?
Number two.
Okay, I knew I had a switch. Sometimes I'm verbally dyslexic. So, anyways, those are the 2 websites, and I've got online courses. So if you're new to Tantra and you want to just get sneak peeks, I've got all sorts of short 5-minute practices you can do with a partner, and then extended practices so that you could even give someone a full Tantra session. So go check it out.
Thank you so much, Leah, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I cannot wait to see you guys in the next masterclass. With that said, bye for now. Bye, Leah.
Au revoir.